Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Deepdale. If you weren't here and you're wondering, yes, this was worth the hype. Norwich City have beaten Preston North End. Not by 1 goal, not by 2 goals, not by 3 goals, but by 4 goals to nil. It's some opening league game in charge for David Wagner. 4 goals, 3 points. You can't argue with that, can you? Welcome, as I said, to the video verdict. My name is Connor Southwell. Thank you very much for joining me, whether you're watching this live or post live, I guess. Wow. Well, I tell you what, when I arrived at Deepdale today, I was wondering about the many things that we might see this afternoon. I have to be honest, a convincing, thumping Norwich City win, but also the quality of performance that we saw this afternoon was absolutely nowhere near my list. As I said, 4-0. 4-0. It's hilarious. 4-0. And to quote the Peep Show, I don't want to tempt fate, but I think everything is going to be absolutely brilliant forever. David Wagner, as the Norwich City fans were singing throughout this afternoon's game, is very much at the wheel. And what fun it was as well, and what a joy it was to consume when it's played in that way. And actually, lots of people will be reflecting on it in different ways. I'm sure there will be people talking about maybe why a decision wasn't made earlier or various different elements and factors and debates. But look, ultimately, the truth is this. If anyone has wondered at any point this season why this group of players has been so highly spoke about or feels so highly rated, it's because of what we saw today, because that is the quality and the level of performance that they can produce. And actually, at points, it kind of felt like the shackles had been released. There was energy, there was a little bit of swagger about the way they played. And actually, considering the time frame that David Wagner has had to work on this group of players and implement what he wants to do, that was a massive step forward. And look, it wasn't perfect. There were elements of it that weren't, where perhaps we want them to be. And that is nitpicking. And David Wagner will, of course, do that. And he will be keen to just temper the optimism that is built off this result. But that was bloody good. And there's not been many times I've been able to stand here in front of you after games and say that. Let's start at the beginning with the team selection, because I, like many people, probably raised an eyebrow when I saw a few of the names included in David Wagner's team selection. Angus Gunn was dropped. Tim Krul came in. We'll come back to that later on. Kieran Dowell and Onel Hernandez were afforded starts. I have to be honest, I was a little bit concerned about Kieran Dowell in a high-pressing team. He isn't the most athletic of players. I don't think I'm being unkind by saying that, and I think he would probably admit that himself. How wrong I was. Onel Hernandez, there's obviously question marks about him starting games and the impact that he can have. Not necessarily from me, but certainly I saw it pre-game, so I know that discourse existed. And also, David Wagner's predecessor was very keen to cast him in this role of kind of a finisher, someone who could come on and impact games late on. He's disproven that today because he can do that. So that was an interesting selection. Norwich lined up. It was, even though it looked like a 4-4-2 and it functioned like a 4-4-2 at points, it was a 4-2-3-1 out of possession. Sargent just dropped behind Temu Pukki. In possession, though, Norwich build up with a back three. Kenny McLean splits the centre-backs. There is a little bit of a central issue at times, which I'll come back to, but then there's almost an attacking 5, and we see the best teams attack with 5 players. Aarons and Yanulis provide the width. They look completely unleashed and a real threat. And that probably has been why so many people have been watching this season with frustration and watching Max Aarons with frustration, and why he's probably looked and cut a frustrated figure at times. You saw it for, what goal was it? That's a nice position to be in. One of the goals where he just drifted inside superbly and completely opened up the game. I think it was for Dow's first. And that was excellent. Yanulis as well provided some real width. Kenny McLean plays in like a kind of quarterback role. That's what I'm going to describe it. I spoke to him post-match, and he spoke about dropping into the back three and helping with the build-up. I thought he was absolutely superb today. Any kind of debate as to why, and David Wagner's the third Norwich City manager, Daniel Farke, Dean Smith, David Wagner, all consider him an instrumental part of this team. Just watch that performance today and watch the levels and energy and high octane and the standards that he sets across the pitch. This was as good a performance from Kenny McLean as I can remember seeing in a while. And he was excellent. So that's how Norwich structurally set up. Anyone who kind of felt that it was going to be this real relentless high pressing constantly, I think is maybe a little bit... I don't know, I think you have to prepare yourself that it's not always that. There are times where Norwich squeeze the play in kind of wide areas, and what they're really good at and what David Wagner is really good at actually is kind of pressing and using the touchline as an extra man. So if you imagine a player penned by the side of the pitch, Norwich then really pen them in with 3 or 4 players at the touchline, because of course if the ball goes over that off a Preston player, that is a Norwich ball, so that is an advantage to them. They squeeze the game in that way really well, and Preston actually, I felt, particularly for the first 35 minutes, could not grasp what Norwich City were doing here today. They were utterly outstanding, dominant, played with control, with purpose, with energy. There was some really nice attacking combinations and attacking movements. Teemu Pukki again looked like a completely different player. There were movements in behind. There were movements coming short to get the ball. There were really nice moments between Sargent and Pukki. There was Max Aarons joining attacks, Dimi Yanulis joining attacks, Gabriel Sara really controlling the midfield. He looked like he was having real fun at points as well. And Norwich City just were too much for Preston to handle and had too much quality and too many innovative, good ideas that Preston were unable to counter that and unable to counter punch, and didn't really have a response to what Norwich City were trying to do. That was until Ryan Lowe made a double substitution in the second half of the first half. After half an hour, he brought on Alvaro Fernandez. And who else did he bring on? Someone else whose name escapes me at the moment. But he made a double change, and that did kind of stem the flow a little bit. It penned Norwich City's fullbacks in just a tad. And they kind of had a period where they maybe gave a little bit of encouragement to Preston. And Kenny McLean spoke how David Wagner was frustrated about that at half-time. And again, Preston came out. Liam Delap was sent through, and Tim Krul forced into a really good save. There was a couple of other moments as well. And after half-time, of course, Norwich City already 3-0 up. They did invite Preston into the game a little bit, and it did become, for about 10, 15 minutes, really until the fourth goal, a little bit of a basketball match, a little bit end-to-end. That you have to accept that with the way that Norwich City are going to play. And when it works, like today, it's going to look utterly outstanding. But there are going to be times where they ship goals, and pretty poor goals, and are also going to look a little bit disjointed when they don't get the press right. And they didn't always today, but for the vast majority, they looked cohesive and structured. So you have to accept that as part of this process and as part of this evolution to what they want to get to. So they had that spell in the second half. And then again, Teemu Pukki's fourth, Norwich's fourth, Teemu Pukki's second, his 10th of the season, his 89th for the club. Unbelievable, by the way. Lovely cross-field ball by Max Aarons, straight to Teemu Pukki's foot. He still has a lot to do. Spins Alvaro Fernandez, then pokes the ball into the back of the net. A really wonderful goal by a really wonderful player who has been absolutely starved of service today. Obviously, I'm exaggerating this, but it certainly felt like he had a lot more influence and a lot more passes and a lot more connection and a lot more moments where his runs were being picked out today than it has in the entirety of the season that's gone. He looked much happier. He was livelier. He was kind of reminiscent of the Teemu Pukki that we saw 2 or 3 years ago. And there's been a lot of talk about him. I think the world of Teemu Pukki. He's a wonderful, wonderful footballer. Really, really intelligent. I think this idea that he's lost anything is a little bit far-fetched, if I'm honest. He's actually just been playing in a team that has really struggled to supply him with the kind of service that he needs. If Norwich City can replicate what we had today in terms of service, in terms of attacking intent, fullbacks getting high, Dowell and Hernandez just slotting in those really dangerous spaces between the fullbacks and the centre-backs, he is going to have an absolute blast playing in this team, and he's going to score a lot of goals in the process as well. So that was really good. Kenny McLean, as I mentioned earlier, was really good. I mean, you could go through the team, actually. I did want to speak about the goalkeeping situation, because I was quite perplexed pre-match to see Angus Gunn dropped, as I'm sure quite a few of you guys watching this were as well. I'm not in David Farger's press conference, which is going on now, so I don't know the full reasoning for that decision or why it was made. And actually, he put a lot of pressure on Tim Krul, I felt, because and not pressure that was of his own making. He's been a wonderful servant to Norwich City. He's achieved some wonderful things at this football club. He's been really steady, really consistent for the most part. Actually, he was dropped out of the team for that 3-2 defeat to Preston earlier on in the season. And I don't want kind of the reaction in terms of the shock at Angus Gunn being dropped, that to be taken as a reflection on him as a goalkeeper, because he's a very good one. Different qualities, and certainly for me, I feel that Angus Gunn has really edged him this season in pretty much every department, which is for me why this decision was was a little bit bizarre, and I felt his distribution last weekend was slightly poor, and there were some scary, hairy moments this afternoon actually in terms of his distribution. But he made two colossal saves actually just after the break. The first from Liam Delap after he was sent through, and the second from Tom Cannon after he was sent through. A brilliant save to push the ball onto the bar behind for a corner. And actually, if Norwich concede those goals, suddenly it's 3-2, and suddenly this game has a completely different complexion and feels a lot more uncertain than it did today. So he deserves a lot of credit as well, Tim Krul. It wasn't a perfect performance by any means, but he did enough to make sure that kind of decision and that him replacing Angus Gunn isn't the story this afternoon. The story is how good Norwich City were, and he played a really crucial part in that. So I think all that's left really for us to dissect is the goals. And I mentioned that kind of attacking five that Norwich are now. You've got Aarons, then you had Dowell, who was on the right. He just drifts inside into that kind of half space. Then you have Sargent, Pukki, Hernandez, and Yunus. That's 6, isn't it? Is it? Might be 6. 5 or 6 that Norwich City are attacking with when they go forward. And the first goal is really engineered from that. It is Max Aarons taking that space inside, showing that attacking intent that has made him the fullback that Barcelona have been interested in, that has had price tags, amazing, eye-watering price tags pushed above his head. Comes inside, but then the composure just to look up, spot Hernandez in a really good position, finding him in the area. It then gets a little bit congested. I need to see it back, but it felt to me like Hernandez has taken a shot slightly off balance. It falls to Sarah in the area. And again, just a real sense of awareness and bit of quality that has been absent for a lot of Norwich City's play, and particularly in the final third this season. Spots up, spots Teemu Pukki in a far better position, rolls the ball across, and the finish is absolutely emphatic, just caresses it into the top corner. Really, really beautiful, well-worked goal, whether by design or by accident, quite frankly. The second one, which came 2 minutes later, comes from a pass out to Kenny. I think it was a free kick or a corner that came all the way across to the back post. Kenny McLean kind of keeps it alive, pokes it into Max Aarons, I think it was again. Lovely back heel, and it's an emphatic finish by Kieran Dowell, who just opens up his body. Really good technique to get power and accuracy and just push the ball away from the goalkeeper. It was a real kind of drive through the ball, and that added such pace to it and such dip to it as well. Kisses one post and goes into the back of the net. 2-0. From there, it feels, to be honest, like a tall order for Preston to come back into this contest. Obviously, they make it 3 before the break with a goal that, for me, wouldn't have been out of place in one of Daniel Farke's teams, or certainly one of the title-winning campaigns of seasons gone by. It starts with Tim Krul. He rolls it out to Dimi Yunus. Again, real bravery, and that probably sums up what Norwich City did today. Real bravery and responsibility with the ball. Takes it in field, then finds Kieran Dowell, I think, might have been Josh Sargent. He threads a ball through to Teemu Pukki, and then from there just rolls the ball across, and Kieran Dowell can roll it in. It's a brilliantly executed goal, and if that is the standard and style of football that David Wagner is going to bring to Norwich City, it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and it's going to be brilliant to watch as well. That was a beautifully worked goal. And then, like I say, the game, Ryan Lowe makes 2 changes that did impact it. Norwich offered Preston a little bit of encouragement. I think that will come as a little bit of frustration to David Wagner. And the second half was, for me, about mentality and about application more than ability. They had some real chances. And actually, you could say probably, even though maybe Preston could have got 2 back, Norwich certainly could have won this by a greater margin than they did. Josh Sargent had a couple of opportunities where the ball didn't quite break through. Kenny McLean had a shot when he created a 2v1, and I've already spoken about the 4th goal, which was just unbelievably well crafted, and again really different to the 3rd goal because it was a longer pass forward. Teemu Pukki making an absolute he's a nightmare, makes a mockery of Fernandez, who's a very good player, by the way, on loan from Manchester United, and pokes the ball past Woodman. And like I say, there were opportunities to add a 5th. Norwich didn't need to do that. And look, of course, you can't get carried away with one performance in isolation. Norwich City will have tougher tests than this Preston team this season and for the rest of this season. But it just felt like a result that everyone needed, that the football club needed, that the 900 plus fans who are in the stand behind me needed. And there was a really nice sort of picture of unity at the end with the whole, so every player who was on the pitch today stood in front of that away end applauding. Together, connection, all of those words that you want to attach to it. It felt really, really good. And they deserved that because they were exceptionally good today. And for as poor as Preston were, and there was a real lack of energy. I think Ryan Lowe tactically didn't grasp what David Wagner or Norwich City were trying to do this afternoon. Norwich were outstanding. So yes, this was a brilliant performance. It's a performance that creates momentum, a performance that hopefully installs some confidence, not just in the players on the pitch, but in people in the stands. Norwich are very much in this playoff race, so to speak. They always have been. That is the nature of this division, which has been so chaotic all season. And you've always felt that if they can get a run together and they can get themselves and produce performances like this, then the quality that they have in this team means that they're going to be up there. And I think that is all that everyone has wanted to see. The quality that everyone knows this Norwich City squad have and has been displayed, graphically illustrated on this pitch behind me, is actually seen through performances. And that is what we saw this afternoon. And that is why Norwich City will leave Deepdale with 4 goals and 3 points and a very, very, very good start to David Wagner's era. I certainly can't think of a more impressive opening league game in charge for a head coach at Norwich City than that. That was quite something, and it will also set the standards bar pretty high as well. And now the challenge is, with this momentum and this positive momentum, Norwich City have to keep rising it, particularly with what you feel are tougher challenges down the road. But that was a result that everyone needed. Of course, you can go to the Pink 'Un channels to consume much more analysis. David Wagner's reaction, Kenny McLean's reaction, the fans' reaction. Everything will be across there. Take a subscription out. Take a free trial out for the Pink 'Un Plus app this evening. Go on the back of a win. Treat yourself. It's free for a month. Give yourself a little look around and see what you think of the content. Thank you all very, very much for watching. David Wagner is at the wheel at Norwich City. And if he produces a little bit more of that, I think we're all going to be sat in the bus behind him. Thank you very much for watching.